Good evening, I'm Sarah Adams. Welcome to Ask the Specialists. Tonight we have a special edition of Ask the Veterans on CMU Public Television. Stay with us. Good evening. Thanks so much for tuning in to CMU Public Television for a very special Ask the Specialists this evening. Tonight we are asking the veterans. I'm Sarah Adams, your host, and we want to remind our viewers that this is not a call-in program. We have guests here in our studio and we're going to talk about some issues and get their input on things, but we want to remind you it is not a live call-in show. Thanks so much for tuning in this evening. Without further ado, let's introduce our guests for tonight. Steve Rellinger, Director of Veterans Resources Center here at CMU. Steve, thanks for being with us tonight.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
What are the kinds of things that you do in your field?
Well, the Veterans Resource Center at Central Michigan University is essentially the one-stop shop for veterans trying to set up their GI Bill benefits. So CMU has global operations, as you probably very well know, and your viewers may know, all across the United States, 50 centers, 22 are on bases and installations. And then we have, obviously, our operations here in the Mount Pleasant campus. So we have about 8,000 students global, 20-some students here on campus, and we have about 1,000 veterans across those operations using those VA benefits, as well as current military personnel at the bases and installations. We have an ROTC program on campus, and then the respective family members for those benefits. So they come into our office and we help them get that benefit set up and navigate the CMU and the VA system and move forward accordingly and hopefully reach their goal to graduate.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for being here tonight and providing insight into this conversation.
You're welcome.
Next we have Robert Guyard, Veterans Service Officer. Robert, thanks for being here tonight.
Thanks, Sarah.
What types of work do you do?
I work directly with the veterans, and I also work in the Student Veterans Resource Center with Steve Rellinger as well, as a representative with CMU, but directly with the Marine Corps League underneath the direction of Jason Allen and the Veterans Administration as well. Our goal is also, as mentioned earlier with Steve, is to create a one-stop shop. It's a new college campus initiative program that's been introduced via the state as well, where these individuals, veterans and dependents as well, can come in, see somebody like myself. Our region specifically is Region 3 of the 6 regions that have been designated for this particular program, where they can actually come in and do their compensation and pension, as well as some educational benefits outside of the expertise that the Veterans Resource Center offers already.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks for being here tonight and contributing to our conversation.
Thank you.
Last but not least, Jason Allen, Director of the Department of Military and Veteran Affairs. Jason, thanks so much for your presence tonight.
Sarah, thank you very much, and we really appreciate Central Michigan's interest in this. And with the new direction that is being put forth under Governor Snyder's executive order and then the additional money coming in, we're in charge of doing a variety of different things helping veterans. Our director is Jeff Barnes, and then we are running a trust fund. We have homes that we're in charge of. We work with coordinating benefits in a variety of different areas with our veteran service officers, our partners here at Central Michigan and throughout the state of Michigan.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for your presence here tonight and the input that you're going to give us as well. I thought we'd start off this evening by talking a little bit about veterans in general. And Steve, before the show, we were talking about the definition of a veteran. How would you define a veteran?
Well, a veteran is someone who at one point in his or her life signed the contract to serve their nation. And that can be a Guard, National Guard, a reserves, or any of the military branches on active duty. And in signing that contract, basically wrote a blank check payable to the United States for an amount up to and equal his or her life. So we owe them a great debt of gratitude for their service to our country, for their commitment, especially if you think in terms of it in the last 10 to 12 years that we've been at war. So we need to be prepared as a community to welcome them back and not just thank them for that, but have the support services in place from Director Allen's office at the state level to Robert and I essentially being front lines to make that transition as easy and as comfortable and as helpful as possible.
I think there's some misconceptions about what what a veteran is, and I thought that definition really said it perfectly. Someone in the past or present who has written a blank check to their country. Talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. You know, the check that they have written is unconditional. And as a veteran myself, I served in the first Gulf War with the United States Marine Corps. And you know, the most important factor, the most important thing to understand with these veterans, and not just the veterans, but their dependents and their family members as well, is that the support mechanism that they need should be unconditional and 100% supported.
Okay. Federal level.
And to give you a little bit of an overview of our state, and we have a very rich history as far as being active within the military. Our state was set up as a Civil War. After the Civil War, about 50% of the population of the men served in the Civil War in the state of Michigan.
Wow.
And for every death, there were one survivor. In the World War II, 25% of the men served in World War II, and for every death, there were 2 survivors. And in this conflict, we have less than 3% of our population serving, about 17% women. And then for every death, there's about 26 survivors. So we're having a much different population, as Robert knows from his time back from the first Gulf War. And what we are seeing is that as a state, we have about 680,000 veterans, roughly about 200,000 World War II and Korean survivors, about 250,000 Vietnam-era veterans, and their age span runs from about 55 to about 75. And then we have roughly about 120,000 young men and women coming back from the Iraq and Afghanistan war starting in 1990. And then the balance is sort of filled in between Korea and Vietnam and after Vietnam and before the Gulf War.
Wow. Those are some incredible numbers.
Right. So we have the 11th largest population. And you know, the CMU listening area probably has a couple 100,000 veterans for our listeners in the communities.
Well, let's discuss some of those transitional issues that come up for veterans, whether that are coming back in the last couple of years or came back after World War II. We were talking a little bit about the show about some of those transitional struggles that come up. Steve, talk to us a little bit about some of the things.
Well, the vision for the Veterans Resource Center was to consolidate operations. So again, they had the one-stop shop, and I like to think of it in terms of a triangle. At the base of a triangle is the Veterans Resource Center, and we tell everyone that comes through that office, we're your point of contact. And any military person or family member understands POC, point of contact. So that's the foundation for our operations. On the other side of the triangle is our Student Veterans of America chapter, which are individuals that are coming back to school using their GI benefits that are part of the Student Veterans of America, which is very much like a fraternity or sorority for veterans or veteran-friendly individuals. And then on the other side of the triangle, to complete that and keep the veteran, family member, and current military in the middle of that triangle, is our outreach activities. As an example, we have the documentary, The Welcome. We use it as a fundraiser for the Student Vets organization. We also use it to educate and enlighten the CMU faculty, staff, members of our internal community as well as the external community, and a number of other outreach activities that we have in place to help everyone be educated, as I said before, as a community to understand that population and to help them transition.
Some of the things that veterans are dealing with when they return or even years later, post-traumatic stress is a big one.
Yes, it is. All the way back to, World War I, World War II, Vietnam, or let me backtrack a little bit, Korea, Vietnam, the first Gulf War, Iraq, Afghanistan. PTSD has been labeled as, I believe, a misunderstanding, and now on the forefront of medication, medicine, psychology, psychiatry, and everything else, we're able to finally start to narrow this down just a bit. And I think one of the most important things with PTSD and other ailments, or let me say other conditions that are developed throughout war, are to be able to address those issues. And those are one of the things that the service organizations, and I believe that the colleges, and also as well as the VA and Veterans Administration, are creating this cohesive unit and the getting together to actually tackle these and make these individuals feel more comfortable with outreach programs, whether they're on campus, through the Veterans Administration, medical centers, and so forth.
Is that something that you deal with on a day-to-day basis?
Yes, I do, and it's been a It's been a large issue, and what we've done here at this particular campus at Central Michigan University, which I find very dear to my heart, is that we've been able to create a location, which is in the Student Veterans Resource Center, which Steve is the director of that center. We're able to create a comfortable environment for these veterans to come into and discuss maybe some of the issues that they may have. From that point on, we can develop claims, compensation, pension, and discuss what their educational needs are from there, and then direct them to the proper medical needs they need.
And this is a big issue because it's somewhat hard to diagnose, if I'm not mistaken, and it can be misinterpreted as other things. What type of advice would you offer a viewer who is maybe not sure what they're struggling with, if it is post-traumatic stress, or there are resources available, there's help available? There
is, Sarah. I think the most important thing first is to seek out maybe other veterans that understand these issues, and then have that veteran help guide them through the process, and include the family members as well. Create that cohesive unit with everybody so everybody understands what's going on.
At the federal and state level, these are programs that are considered very important as one of the needs of our veterans. Talk a little bit about that.
What our strategies have been, and Steve and Robert sort of very well articulated on the ground level, is really working with our partners to create awareness. And that's why we're so grateful for what you guys are doing this evening. Because so many families do not recognize, so many soldiers, so many people that are dependent upon these veterans, some of those challenges. Now, besides the whole aspect of what we are doing within the post-traumatic stress disorder, we are working to make sure that our veterans are aware of their benefits. So when they come home from Iraq and Afghanistan or are discharged from military service, they automatically qualify for 5 years free health care. And to get men and women enrolled in that is kind of the first step, because then that hopefully allows them to sit down with their healthcare providers through the VA and actually have a discussion about some of the challenges. Besides the wonderful programs they're doing on the campuses and within the communities, that is a really big step. We're also then the analysis of trying to make sure that they're aware of the disabilities, because the survivability ratings that we talked about earlier has really changed the stresses on the VA system and also on the soldiers because of the multiple deployments. And because of that, besides the mental issues that they're facing, they're also facing physical. And so the real key is awareness to make sure that families understand some of the challenges that these young men and women are coming back with.
Let's talk a little bit about the families and the children, spouses, children, extended families. How are they impacted first by deployment and then by the return? This is something that, aside from the heartwarming reunions that one sees on television, you might not necessarily hear a lot about some of those things that those families are dealing with.
Well, that's exactly it. It's a unit issue, and the unit being that family. So, you know, when I was in, I was married at the time, and we had our first child when I was in, and I got to see him for about 10 days, and then I was deployed back on the ship and didn't see him again until he was 4 months old. So during those deployments, during those times I'm at sea, my wife Lynn is at home taking care of the business, basically, and that means everything, and she's on her own. So especially as Jason and Robert have alluded to, when you talk about combat veterans, those that are in harm's way on a regular day in and day out basis, so their family members are back home taking care of the situations there while their loved one is facing that kind of difficulty. And so for them to come back, the soldier, the Marine, the Airman, and so on and so forth, and reintegrate into that family unit can be very difficult. So an understanding of that, again, as a community, what those needs are, what that transition can mean is very important, and we can't lose sight of that. And that's why, again, you look historically at the Vietnam vets, not only was their time in the service during a war, but they came back in many cases to a political and situations where they weren't welcome back like our vets are now. And so they still have those psychological issues from that alone. We can't do the same thing with our veterans now. We have to be prepared as a community to welcome them with open arms. Thank you for what you've done. You don't have to agree with the politics of it, but support that soldier, support that Marine, support that Navy person, and so on and so forth. It's absolutely critical.
And yeah, and additionally to what Steve said, and with Jason as well, is that the new programs that have been implemented in, especially the College Campus Initiative program, we're able to reach out to veterans from all generations and their family members as well.
Wow.
This is the first time I would say that this has actually happened. We have, I believe, Steve, it's 43 total in the continuum, is that correct? With 25 universities and 18?
15 public universities and 20
and
community colleges
20.
are part of the consortium.
And we're able to reach out and offer these educational benefits, compensation, pension benefits, this new training 1-year program for the Vietnam veteran era veterans and so forth. And it's just unbelievable. You know, we are reaching out to them and giving them services that they so have earned.
And when you look at this from a policy perspective, the things that we are also trying to work with families is that so many of them may be facing some financial challenges. First item up is we have the Michigan Veterans Trust Fund, which was designed for wartime era benefits, and that's a resource for families that may need one-time emergency repairs and assistance, and that's available at michigan.gov/veterans. Through the Guard and Reserve Fund at the Michigan National Guard, that is also another support mechanism that allows for assistance for families that are deployed in the Guard and Reserves, because as much as we think about it as, you know, guys in the National Guard is our big number, and the reserves are our big number of soldiers. And so that is a great fund and resource that if you're deployed, to be able to help. And then trying to make sure that the families are, after the soldier comes home, you know, the first 6 months are somewhat romantic within those families because it's been a readjustment back. But then how do you make sure that the children are knowing that since dad or mom has been away, that if they're not going to use their GI Bill, that they qualify to transport that GI Bill to the children? Those are the types of challenges we face on a daily basis, is just communicating, as Rob talks about, with those family members to make sure that they understand that there's a support network available to them from the community and also through the VA.
Let's talk a little bit about that and dig a little bit deeper, because there is a transition period for the families. Let's say some of those families are watching tonight. What kinds of advice would you give them right now in their homes?
Well, it really starts with what Robert said. Get connected somewhere. If it's a fellow veteran or a fellow spouse of a veteran, a dependent, just get connected somewhere, be engaged somewhere, reach out. That's the hardest part, is to reach out and say, I need help. Because again, that transition can be so difficult. And you know, to clarify with the veteran benefits, there are, as Jason said, a number of family members that use benefits. It can be under Chapter 33 where it's transferred. If the military person has enough time in service, they can transfer it to a spouse or dependent. But there's also Chapter 35 that is for those that, for a veteran that is 100% service-connected disabled, then they can transfer their, not transfer, but the spouse or dependent can use that education benefit to go to school because the veteran can't, or if the veteran's killed in action. My sister used that benefit. My mom's first husband was killed in action in Korea, so my sister, when she became 18, used that benefit to go to school. It's a wonderful program. It's the way it should be for a war orphan. So just being connected and getting educated, like we've talked about, and reaching out to someone, whether it's to the VFW, whether it's to the Marine Corps League with Robert, or someone at the Educational Institute, it doesn't matter. Just reach out to someone to understand what's available for you.
What advice would you give?
And I agree with Steve 100% as well, and that's one of the neat things about being on campus. Those services, when I got back from the Gulf, I came back, was in school, I was the tough Marine that was not going to fail. But there is a lapse period there, like you said. There's a romantic period when you come back, and you really think you're invincible, and that's not necessarily true. So reach out to whichever direction you go. The service organizations, the Marine Corps League, the VFW, Purple Heart, American Legion, and the DAV, as well as the Veterans Administration and the colleges, you know, are really all coming together as this unit. And the services are there. Your local service chapters are there. You can walk into any of your VA offices if you need to, and now for the first time on campus you can walk in. So I really would like to let all the veterans out there and their family members know that Michigan has really taken a forefront on this new pilot program, the Campus College Initiative program, and really looking out for the veterans via the colleges and the Veterans Administration as well.
Some wonderful programs in place. You said that you experienced a tough transition coming back. How does that transition into what you're doing now and helping others?
That's a wonderful question, Sarah. It took me about 5 years before I realized I wasn't quite as invincible and as tough as I thought I was. And I went through a period of time where, I probably did what most military members do that come back from combat and hit a low point in their life. And I was fortunate enough to come back with the aid of the Veterans Administration and some of these wonderful doctors and some of these wonderful service organizations. And I just recently graduated from CMU in the fall, cum laude, with underneath the Chapter 31 program.
Congratulations.
And I couldn't have done it unless I reached out, and that particular mechanism of efficiency was there for me, and that comes from everybody. Thank you, Steve and Jason and the Marine Corps League and all the organizations out there.
Well, I think that's an important point, that you all have served and you now transition into helping others. What kinds of advice would you give to our viewers who are watching who maybe aren't quite sure where to turn at this point? And this encompasses post-traumatic stress and reconnecting and physical rehabilitation. There's a lot of things at play here.
And I think this is indicative for our men and women coming back, but there's also a lot of Vietnam era veterans that are still struggling with some of these issues. The first item up would be is that there's a wealth of information available at the VA website.
Okay.
And there are great videos that are available if you just transition videos that you can help at least get an understanding of some of the challenges. The next thing is that every unit under General Vadnais' control, which is about 13,000, and we've got about 1,000 people overseas in the Michigan National Guard, has a yellow ribbon program. And those family members, it's optional to attend, but we strongly encourage them to sit down and make sure that they've got all of the paperwork in order to get that documentation, so that helps them with this, signing up for those other benefits. And then finally, I think I can't overemphasize enough is this peer group. And sometimes that's very hard for warriors to say that they need to talk to a buddy. And that is a key aspect of their ability to re-establish themselves in the community.
We've been talking about community and the importance of community and society and playing a role in that adjustment as well. And we've talked about the adjustment for the veterans themselves, and we talked about the adjustment for their families. But community members, how can community members get involved and play a positive role in this readjustment period? Because you said it's a ripple effect. This person that is a part of our lives and a part of our community, we all are involved.
Sure.
Talk about that.
Well, one of the easiest, quickest ways is to volunteer. And there are lots of places you can volunteer. Jason and Robert have, again, talked about the Legion and all the other VFW and all the other entities out there that you can volunteer in. But there are also, as an example, we brought in a national speaker a couple of weeks ago, Allison Lighthouse, to talk about that transition and all those resources to be in place. And we invited the community to come. So there were first responders, police department and such that were there. There were mental health workers and those types of individuals throughout our community that came in. So there are lots of entities out there where you can call and get information that you can share with others. It's simple as that. Or again, volunteer or just to help out in any way you can. But to educate and inform is the biggest part of it. So when you are having a conversation with somebody, well, I don't have the answer, but I know where to go to get that answer. And we say that all the time in the office. So having Robert under Jason's program in our office now, I could always refer them out to elsewhere, but right there in the office, having a resident expert is as good as it gets.
We've got about 4 minutes left, but talk a little bit more about that. Give your thoughts on that.
I think Steve's making me feel a little good here, but I appreciate it.
Speak only the truth.
To elaborate on that a little bit, I've got to be thankful for the training that we had down in Detroit, number one. Number two, as Jason had mentioned, the VA.gov website is something I've been using for years, and I like to train and help a lot of the individuals with that website as well. It's an amazing website, and also the services that CMU offers as well too. It's on the forefront of education. It's on the forefront of allowing these individuals to find the necessary resources they need. And if we don't have them, we work together as a unit, a cohesive unit, to find those answers, because nobody knows all the answers. You never do. And that's where we go.
And I think that's an important point to make. No one has all the answers.
Right.
And I think maybe sometimes members of the community that aren't a part of that immediate family unit may not know how to react or what to say or what they can do. And I think that's an important point.
Right. And I think, you know, the other thing is that we're working with other social agencies.
Okay.
So homeless shelters, we sense that from the VA statistics, 1 in 10 homeless are veterans. When they come into mental health clinics, when you come into county health departments, when they call 211, we're really encouraging communities to ask, are you a veteran? Because with that, you can get those individuals automatically over to VA healthcare if they're having financial, if they're having mental issues, physical issues, and it's a great tool that's available.
We've got just a couple of minutes left here, believe it or not. So I just want to kind of wrap up by maybe asking you gentlemen to briefly say what is one thing that you want people to walk away from this program with?
For me, again, it's all about educating and just being educated and understanding a little bit about military, veterans, family members, and using that accordingly, that education.
I would just like to sum up by letting all the veterans and their dependents and family members know that there's a big word out there, and it's called hope. And it does work, and it does happen with the proper resources, and I'm living proof of it.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
I would like to ask, one area that we did not talk a lot about was our Vietnam-era veterans, and there's 250,000 of them in the state of Michigan. One of the big areas that is not gotten a lot of interest, but is a great area for help is with presumptive diseases. Things like ischemic heart disease, cancer, diabetes are all directly related to exposure to dioxin from Agent Orange in Vietnam. Those would be what they call presumptive diseases, which allow you to qualify for a pension and health care. And it's an area that sometimes is underutilized in a lot of areas.
Gentlemen, thank you. Believe it or not, we are out of time. And if people want to find additional resources and connect with all of you, michigan.gov/veterans. All right, thank you so much. You've been watching Ask the Specialists here on CMU Public Television, a special edition called Ask the Veterans. I want to thank each of you for being here. Steve Rellinger, Director of the Veterans Resource Center at CMU, thanks for your input this evening.
Thank you, Sarah.
Robert Guyard, Veteran Services Officer here. Thank you for your input and for
Thank you.
sharing
With
us.
the Marine Corps League, too.
Marine Corps League, thank you.
Thank you.
And Jason Allen, the Director of the Department of Military and Veterans Affairs. Thanks for your input today. Thanks to each of you, our viewers, for watching. You can always find out more about Ask the Specialists at WCMU.org. For all of us, I'm Sarah Adams. Good night.